2022 has been a very controversial year for Novak Djokovic after being denied entry to the 2022 Australian Open. Due to his opposition to vaccines, he was also barred from the US Open the same year. However, it appears that Djokovic has officially signed up to play in another major tournament, which might help him get back some lost time. Let's take a look. First, what tournament did Djokovic sign up for? Djokovic recently announced that he has signed up for the ATP 250 tournament, set to be held in Tel Aviv, Israel this year. In case you didn't know, the ATP Tour 250 is the lowest ranked tournament on the ATP Tour, so it doesn't really make sense for an elite player like Djokovic to play on it. The event will be called the Tel Aviv Water Gen Open, and it's the first edition of the event since 1996. In a tweet following the announcement, Djokovic thanked many of his fans and said that he's looking forward to finally competing again. None of the other players at the Tel Aviv event are nearly as skilled or decorated as Djokovic, so it's likely that he's going to win. Sure, it's no US Open, but Djokovic still has a lot of other events lined up for the future. Next, how did fans react to Djokovic's announcement? Djokovic's announcement that he will be playing in the Tel Aviv tournament was certainly a shock to a lot of fans. Even though a lot of big names have already been confirmed for that tour, none of them are nearly as high profile as Djokovic. The reactions were a bit mixed. For starters, fans of Djokovic were simply happy to see him play again. At a time like this, it's getting pretty rare to see Djokovic, a man who could be considered the best tennis player in the world, actually play competitive tennis. But of course, there were also a lot of people that weren't too pleased with Djokovic's announcement. Many of his own fans were upset that Djokovic would play in Israel in light of recent conflicts in the Middle East. A lot of angry fans took to Twitter to express their disappointment with the decision. At the same time, there were also a lot of people defending Djokovic, saying that he's there to play tennis, not to partake in politics. Up next, what are some of the other events Djokovic will be playing in this year? Djokovic wasn't forced to not play in the US Open. Instead, he voluntarily withdrew from the event as he disagreed with the US visa policy for foreigners. The event itself has no requirement for vaccinations, but since Djokovic is a foreigner, he can't enter the US without a visa. Of course, he has had problems like that in Australia as well, and some events outright bar unvaccinated players. But with that in mind, you're probably wondering what are some of the events he can participate in this year. From what we know, Djokovic will be appearing in at least 3 more events this year. The first is going to be the Tel Aviv event, and then he will also be appearing in the Davis Cup finals, where none of the matches will be held in vaccine mandatory countries, and the Laver Cup, which will be held in London. Coming up, Medvedev defends Djokovic in the US Open debacle. Daniil Medvedev might just be the hottest tennis player in the world right now. His recent performance has been nothing short of amazing, and off the court, he's known for taking a few jabs at the expense of Djokovic in interviews. However, on August 31st, 2022, Medvedev actually defended him in an interview. He said that he doesn't really understand the reason behind why Djokovic was barred from entering the US. He mentioned that other unvaccinated American players were allowed to fly into the country to play, while Djokovic wasn't. He said that the rules were inconsistent and pointed out that Djokovic had no plans on living in the country at all either. This is in stark contrast to some of his earlier comments. A few weeks before this interview, Medvedev said that the rules can't simply be bent for just one player. He added that if Djokovic wanted to play in the US Open, he should follow the same rules that everyone else has to follow. Up next, Frances Tiafoe slams Djokovic in interview. Frances Tiafoe is a young American player that has been rising up the ranks as of late. He is currently the world's number 24 in men's singles, which is a a remarkable feat considering he's only 24 years old. But more recently, TFO found himself in an interview where he threw some shade on Novak Djokovic. During the interview, the current state of tennis came up, and of course, TFO was asked about what he thought of Djokovic's absence from the US Open. As it turns out, the young player had very little to say about the absence itself, but he pulled back no punches when talking about Djokovic. TFO said that Nick Kyrgios was the better man at the Wimbledon final, adding that Djokovic exposed himself mentally with his behavior. He also said that Djokovic was not invincible anymore. He believes that there are a lot of players out there, some of whom no one even talks about, that can easily beat Djokovic on a good day. When comparing Djokovic to the likes of Roger Federer, Andy Murray, or Juan Martín del Potro, Kyrgios said that Djokovic completely pales in comparison to the greats. Those were a lot of harsh words, but some of them might just be true. Next, Federer's relations with Djokovic come to light. Roger Federer has previously commented on how disappointed he is with Djokovic's exclusion from the 2022 US Open. It has always been widely assumed that Federer and Djokovic are somewhat close despite their rivalry. They simply love competing against each other. That's why it was such a major disappointment when we found out that the two won't be going head to head. But more recently, Renee Stauffer, who is Roger Federer's official biographer, revealed some details about the kind of relationship that the two tennis legends have. She said that the two players have very similar personalities, describing it as on the same wavelength. Apparently, Federer and Djokovic are always able to contact each other. They also call each other all the time. However, she says that there's still a big gap. They mostly talk to each other whenever it's strictly necessary. They aren't exactly close friends or anything like that. That is pretty shocking, because if you take a look at some of the media reports, you'd think that Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic are sworn enemies, set to destroy each other. But it's good to know that at least some form of sportsmanship still exists in the world. Coming up, Nadal speaks on Djokovic. Rafael Nadal is another member of the Big Three in tennis, along with Roger Federer and Djokovic himself. The three men are not only the biggest names in tennis, but they are also the top three contenders for this year's Grand Slam. However, with Djokovic out of the US Open, he's no longer able to compete for that title. Now, you would expect this to be a sigh of relief for Nadal and Federer, but as it turns out, both of them are disappointed. In a recent interview, Nadal said that it was very sad that Djokovic wasn't able to compete at the US Open. He said that it's a tragedy that one of the best players in the world will not be competing for the biggest prize in tennis. In a way, it's almost unfair. It's clear that he's not happy with the way things are turning out. After all, if Nadal ends up winning the Grand Slam this year, his victory will always be tainted, since one of the best players wasn't even up against him. However, Nadal ended the interview by saying that the sport is far bigger than just one player, noting that the race for the Grand Slam could still be as competitive as ever before. And finally, Clay Travis calls policy against Djokovic a disgrace. The whole Djokovic debacle is something that's much bigger than tennis at this point. It has sparked a whole new debate about whether or not US vaccine policies are actually fair to foreigners. It's not just sports commentators that are reporting on this story now. It's also political commentators. For example, Clay Travis is one of the top conservative radio hosts in the US, and recently he discussed the Djokovic ordeal on his show. He called the refusal to issue Djokovic a visa a disgrace to American policy. He pointed out that even if the goal was to not let unvaccinated people in, it doesn't work, since unvaccinated Americans are still allowed in the country. This heated debate about whether or not it was fair to deny Djokovic a visa is likely going to continue over the course of the entire US Open, and it might just distract fans from the actual event itself. It'll be similar to what we saw during the Australian Open, but only this time, it ruins the whole race to the Grand Slams. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Djokovic deserved to be banned from the US Open? Let us know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.